Well, thank you very much, and welcome once again to Where Are They Now? We've kind of been previewing this for the last 2 hours, and a good friend of mine, you've heard him on this radio station before, Melvin Gilliam, a standout two-way player here at Oklahoma State back in the mid to late 80s, which is hard for me to believe. But, Melvin, appreciate you coming on with us, got to cover, and I couldn't think of anybody better to talk about this Tulsa game coming up than yourself, because you're a Tulsa guy in general and an Oklahoma State guy in particular.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What do you?
Good to be here.
Yeah, tell me. From a. Yeah, you looked at it the other side of the fence, but again, you live in Tulsa and you've known the Tulsa players and coaches over the years and all. What's the mindset as you see it from your side of the fence here that they have going into this game?
Well, I'll tell you, this rivalry for Tulsa is similar. I will say it's similar to the Oklahoma State OU rivalry that we had. Probably not as big, but definitely the same type of rival, because a lot of the guys from Tulsa play at Oklahoma State. A lot of the guys that play at Tulsa have a little chip on their shoulder because they may have wanted to go to Oklahoma State and didn't get recruited and didn't get there. Mm-hmm. So they got something to prove themselves.
We talk that every time we play Tulsa, and I've always felt like, and there was a time around here, well, it's a no-win situation. I don't agree. It's a win. If you beat them, it's a win. So it is a win. There's something on the table for you every time you play them. Now, if you lose to them, you catch a little grief. But overall, you hit it right on the head. So I see matching energy that Tulsa brings in the game Saturday as a crucial part of the game.
No doubt about it. I think Tulsa comes into the game as the underdog, basically saying we have nothing to lose. We're going to leave it all out on the field. And Oklahoma State has to match that intensity and match that energy and don't allow their high energy and all their stuff to overtake it. I think that's one of the main things. That was one of our main comments that we said, at least as a defense and as a team, guys, we can't come out lax, because this is not a bad team. They're not as good as us, but they're not a bad team. And if we come out and don't match their intensity and their energy, it can get ugly. And that's kind of what happened to us in '86.
Yeah, you won 3 out of the 4 times that you played Tulsa. And again, I don't know that the fact that you came from Tulsa, played at Booker T, lived in Tulsa. I mean, I don't know that all played into it. But you know what? You had to see these guys maybe off the field. So it's easier to see them coming off a win than a loss.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, to be honest, that game could really, if we lose that game, it could really hurt us and get into one of those good big bowls.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can't, everyone knew we had a fighting chance. It'd be great games against Oklahoma and Nebraska. So we knew that for a fact. But if we lost one to like a Tulsa or something like that, it just killed the big bowl game for us.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this is not true in every year, but my general feeling, and I was around when you were here, and certainly past that, generally if Oklahoma State didn't win the game against Tulsa, and let's face it, we lost some games in Tulsa over the years, that generally meant you weren't going to have the kind of year you wanted. Now, I don't know if the two were related. Maybe Oklahoma State wasn't going to be having it anyway. But that certainly was a trend. If you lost that game, it was hard to get back on top.
It was. I mean, in that year, I think about it. I mean, '86 was the only year that we didn't go to a bowl. We ended up 6-5 that year, and we lost it. We lost to Tulsa, so it was a gauge almost every year.
Yeah,
so that was a very important game.
And you saw Tulsa, and they've been up and down in this regard. But I mean, Tulsa has had some dudes who have played there and went on to play in the NFL. And they had years when Rader was the head coach there for sure, that they were a legitimate threat.
Man, I'll tell you what, they had a quarterback in '86 when they beat us, T.J. Rubley. I don't know if you guys remember, but he went to the Rams and played. He didn't go sit on the bench. He played. And they had Dan Bitson. Dan Bitson was the head coach at Booker T. Washington in Tulsa. Dan Bitson was a beast. If he wouldn't have had that car wreck, he was a first rounder.
Did you not train during the off season? Because back in those days, I don't know that it was 12 months a year here in Stillwater. I don't believe it was. But did you train kind of in an informal capacity with some of these guys during the summer?
Oh, every summer I went home. I had internships I had an internship at IBM one summer, and so I in Tulsa. So I worked out at the University of Tulsa. Coach Rader was the coach. He took me in and took me to the training room, took me to the managers, and told them treat me like I was a University of Tulsa player. I worked out on their field, in their weight room. So that's why Coach Rader, a great guy. How many coaches do that for a guy that don't even play for them?
I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Oh, man, that wouldn't have happened down in Norman. That would not have happened.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know in many places it would happen there, but that speaks to the respect they have for you. Now, I'm going to jump ahead here. I'm assuming, even though you could have gone anywhere, football, you could have gone anywhere to play basketball, and we'll get into that part here in a minute. But I'm making the assumption at least somebody called you before the recruiting started and say, "How we'd like to have you come to Tulsa."
Oh, no doubt. Coach Rader recruited me. Now, at the time, Coach Richardson was the basketball coach.
Okay.
And Coach Richardson, who was a good friend of mine, who I played with Nolan Jr. at Booker T, and used to spend nights at his house all the time. And he said, "Melvin, I just don't like recruiting kids from Tulsa because it's too much pressure on them." I said, "Coach, that ain't no pressure. Not if you're going to play. Just go play." But he really wouldn't recruit kids from Tulsa because he had a bad situation with a kid, the first kid he recruited from Tulsa. So he never really recruited from a Tulsa kid again.
Wow.
I didn't
realize
got
that.
recruited. Yeah, I definitely got recruited on the football field from the University of Tulsa.
Now, being homegrown, did it at least for 30 seconds ever cross your mind this wouldn't be a bad place to go, or were you just so sure you were going to come here?
Well, I'll tell you, if Coach Richardson would have recruited me to play basketball, I would have tried to play both at Tulsa. I would have. It would have been, that was one of the things that I wanted to do, was to try and play both sports. And all schools didn't really allow me to do it. OU would not allow it. Coach Switzer and Coach Tubbs told me, no, you got to pick one. University of Texas said I could play both. And Oklahoma State said I could play both. LSU said I could play both. UCLA said I could play both. But I really wanted to stay kind of close to home. That's why I was considering TU.
You know, you look at, and we kind of joked about this earlier on, but, you know, your last year was 88, you were 85 through 88, and that was, to me, that was a solid period, because you played with some dudes now, and vice versa here. But there was some studs on those teams and those years. But as you look at the record book, and I said, I don't want to make you feel old now, but all these years later, okay, you got, and it's even more so when you say Bob Fenimore's at the top of the list with 18 interceptions, but you and Mark Moore, are tied for second with 16 interceptions on the career list, quote, all these years later.
Correct. And I'll tell you, I was talking to Mark Moore about 2 weeks ago, because he lives here in Tulsa also. And it's shocking that we're still so high on that list. And you got to remember, when we played, interceptions in bowl games didn't count.
I don't recall that part.
Yeah.
Because the stats in bowl games didn't count, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. They didn't include them in your overall record.
Yeah. And so, I remember that, yeah. So
in some bowl games, I had some interceptions.
Well, we could add to that total right there, maybe, but
there you go. But it was impressive. What's impressive about that is what we talked about. You look at it now, and they throw the ball 50, 60 times a game.
Yeah.
When we played, they may have thrown the ball 25 times a game.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe. So for us to still be on that list after all these years at the top of it, you know, and they didn't really throw the ball like they throw it now. Mark and I was talking about that, and I said, man, could you imagine if we played and they threw the ball 60 times? We probably would have set a record that had never been broken.
Yeah, you probably would have found your way into the pass pattern somewhere along the way. How would you like?
Once in a while.
I mean, you bring up a good point here. How would you like to have played in today's wide open, parking lot kind of game?
Oh, to be honest, Tom, I was built for that. That was my thing. So to be able to throw it 60 times, to have play against someone throwing it 60 times a game, oh man, that was what I was built for. I wasn't really built. Mark was built to come up and knock you out.
Yeah.
That wasn't what I was. That's not what I was built for. I was built to cover. That was my thing.
You were built to cover.
And you got to understand. I never played corner before until I got to college.
Seriously?
I played safety.
Wow.
Yeah, I played safety, but I got to Oklahoma State, and we had a guy named Mark Moore.
Well,
who was All-American.
And plus, you did some returning on top. I mean, we used your athleticism, no doubt about that. I want you to touch on, especially your side of the ball. I mean, you could say this on the offense as well. But, I mean, there were some guys during that era that are still talked about to this day about some of the best in those positions.
Well, I agree with that. We were talented. You got to remember, Tom, in our freshman year in '85, it was the first time that I really recall Oklahoma State getting the number one player out of Texas and the number one player out of Oklahoma in the same year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's ever happened again. That was the first time and probably the only time. And then the year before, they got the top player out of Texas in Thurman.
Yeah.
So that was 2 recruiting years in a row that Oklahoma State probably had one of the top recruiting classes in the country.
How was it?
We were a very talented team.
How was it doing both, the football and the basketball? I had the pleasure of being with you guys, being with you for 2 sports for a couple of years for sure. How difficult was it? Taxing mentally, physically? How was that?
It wasn't physically. It was okay because I don't ever remember being out of shape till probably I got about 35. But it's what I had done my whole life: play both sports, leave football, go play basketball. Mm-hmm. That was normal. What it was tough on was academically, because basketball, sometimes you might be on a week road trip and you miss class. You miss class. So you got to really stay on top of your studies. And that was the trying thing, to really stay on top of it and make sure you still were in a position to graduate.
I tell people here, and they don't, these basketball guys now, on the men and women's side for that matter, if you play Tuesday night or Wednesday night somewhere, you got a little charter plane waiting on you, and you just walk out to Stillwater Airport and bang, you're on there. Game's over, you come home.
Right.
Those games that we're talking about, a Wednesday game, basically turned into a 3-day affair. I mean, we had to leave on a Tuesday, go commercial, play the game. It was too late to come back the next day. So I hear you. I hear what you're saying there.
Yeah, that was the most challenging thing to me, was because I had a lady named Miss Gilliam that didn't play that. So school was not an option. Graduating was not an option. You will go to class and you will apply yourself. so that was never an option. So that was the main thing that was the challenge for me. If you played, we might play in Boulder on Tuesday and then had to go to Iowa State and play on Saturday, on Wednesday, and there you go. That's a 4 or 5 days you just missed.
What basketball game? I want to say it was Kansas. I may be wrong. What game comes to your mind when you think, you know what, that was a heck of a game for me and us and as a team? Anything stand out on the basketball side?
Well, to be honest, the big games is where I played the best. I played well against OU and Kansas every year. I mean, my freshman year, we beat OU, and they went to the Final Four in Stillwater. Mm-hmm. So that was a big game. I had a good game. Against Kansas, I had a great game in Lawrence. I had a great game against Kansas with Danny Manning and those guys. So I had a great game. I mean, I think I scored a lot of points. I played some good defense in that game. But the one game that really stands out was the Iowa State game, because that was the first game I started as a freshman. Mm-hmm. And history made itself that night, because I was the first freshman to start in 2 sports.
Yeah.
in Big 8 history.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big game. We didn't get to win it. We lost in overtime on a buzzer beater shot. But that was the first game I got to start in with Coach Hansen.
What about on the football side? I mean, there were so many big games during the time
man.
you were here. And it'd be easy to jump ahead to 88, right? I mean, we had all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah,
but
88 was a historic year.
Yeah.
But the first game, well, I'll tell you, the first game I started, was our second game against Miami of Ohio. Mark Moore hit a guy and knocked himself out. So I had to go in the game. And so I went in at safety, and I got an interception on the first series. I got in. The second series, I got a big hit on the tight end. And the next game, they moved me to corner, and I never came out again.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I do recall that scenario because obviously I was in the booth. But
right.
I thought you had. I guess now that you mention it, you never did return to safety. I mean, now that you mention it, because I thought somewhere along the line we had to use you one other time as a safety. It took you off the corner, but I guess I was wrong.
I was my junior year, because my junior year they were moving me back to safety. Mark left.
Yeah.
And it was in the middle of the season. I was playing safety. Matter of fact, I started at safety that season.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in leading the nation in interceptions when they had moved me to safety. But our corners weren't performing up to par, so they moved me back to corner.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my junior year. And they moved Jerry Deckard to senior. To safety.
Yeah.
And moved me back to corner. And I was upset the rest of that year, but it worked out for us. So
what was it like being around Gundy the player, and now you've seen Gundy the coach, who has taken this program to heights never seen?
Exactly. Well, Gundy was a tenacious player. He was feisty. I think that he was a kid at the time that all he knew how to do was play hard. That's all he knew, was to play hard. And that's what he did. He played hard. And I think that's the way he coached. He coached hard. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why he's having such success.
You've seen the first two games already.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to think, I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm going to let you do that.
Right.
But I think somebody who was so proficient in covering and limiting the forward pass, if you will, has to be cringing a bit to see as many guys running free in the secondary as we've seen the last two games, and maybe, quite frankly, the last 4 or 5 of last year.
Yeah, it is alarming to me, and I look at it, and, Coach Duffy and I are good friends. Mm-hmm. Me and Coach Duffy talk a lot. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I even come down and talk to some of the guys. But it is odd to me at times to see a guy just running and nobody's in the picture. And I know you have busts. That's part of football. You're going to have some busts every now and then. But we sometimes have them a bit too much. And I don't know, when I talk to the guys, I done sat in meetings before with them, and they get it. It looks like they get it in the film room. They understand it. Football has changed since we played, though, Tom. It's got a lot more complicated. Mm-hmm. Coverages, routes and offenses have gotten so much more in depth. They're so much more difficult. So, everything has changed. Everything has gotten a lot more harder to read. So I get it. They're changing things every series now. When we played, you changed at halftime.
Yeah.
Now they're coming to the sidelines and they're changing because they got iPads out.
Yeah.
They're looking at what they're doing, and now we're going to do this. And so everything is a lot more complicated now. So I can't say that it's so difficult that there probably should have more busts than we did, because the things have gotten so much more advanced.
You went on to have and still are enjoying a very successful career in finance at Spirit Bank and one of the officers there. And you've been part and parcel for a couple of years now of trying to, contribute, if you will, to the financial futures of our student athletes in football and basketball. In fact, ironically, today as we speak, you were here talking to the basketball team about how to manage the money that you are getting now. That's something you guys didn't have back in the day, but what a great asset you are because you can bring all that experience with you.
Exactly. Yeah, I've been lucky enough to come down. Coach Lutz gave me a call and asked if I would come down and speak to the team. As you know, they get NIL funds now.
Yes.
And just to kind of give them some knowledge on how to handle it, how to, invest it, what to do with it. Because as you know, they're getting these funds and they have some requirements now because you still got to claim that money as income and you have to pay taxes and you have to, there are things that come along with that a lot of times the 18, 19-year-old kid has no idea about. So we kind of talk briefly about banking. We talk about saving. We talk about rules and regulations. We talk about expectations. We talk about all those things and that come along with earning an income.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a good eye-opener. The kids, the guys really, really enjoyed it. They really paid attention. They asked solid questions. And I had a great time myself because sometimes it's easier for them to really get it when they see someone that are like them.
Mm-hmm.
I sat in those seats right where they sat. I was in that position, not with NIL money, but I sat in those positions when they said, hey, guys, I need you to know something. Look to your left and look to your right. The odds are 2 of the 3 of you are going to go professional in something other than this sport.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to prepare for it, and you got to be, because the world is cruel, and it doesn't care. So if you don't know, that's on you. So that's why I do those things, because I've seen guys who went to school and they went to the pros and they come out and have nothing to show for it. It's because we didn't do things like that. We didn't come back. They didn't have people come back and talk to them and say, hey, guys, this is important. This is important.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this question. How would NIL and the transiency of the portal, how would that have affected Melvin Gilliam, or would it have affected you back in the day?
Well, I don't think it would have affected me because I was one of the top recruits in the country. So I got to play, Hartley and myself, we got to play kind of right away.
Right. Uh-huh.
A lot of times it affects the guys that don't get to play right away. And I'll tell you, Tom, some of these kids, they don't have realistic expectations. One of the things I say when I talk to those kids is don't expect results and to be put in places that you didn't earn. A lot of these kids expect to be put in the game, and they haven't even earned anything to get put in the game. They haven't worked hard. They haven't put forth the effort, but they expect to be in the game. And those are the kids that sometimes hit that portal. And they get on out of there because they think they came out of high school and they should automatically be in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the way it is. This guy's been there 3 or 4 years. They've been working their butts off. You got to go take their spot. But they think because they came out of high school and they were All-American in high school, the difference in high school and college is a big step. Sometimes you're playing against grown men. I remember the first game against Nebraska, my freshman year. I was playing against some grown men.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an awakening experience for me. So,
you have always remained close to your alma mater, for sure. And you obviously, geographically, you haven't ventured away very far. But you keep a finger on the pulse over here at OSU and been a valuable asset. There's no doubt about that. We can go on for another 30 minutes and probably tell some stories that are true and not stories that are not true. But we'll refrain from doing that. But I always appreciate you, man, coming on. You're one of my favorites. Following you, I known you since you were a young kid coming over here, not knowing right from left, and you had to learn on the go. But you were a heck of a player, man, and you're a great asset to this school.
Tom, I appreciate it, man. And I'm telling you, my guy. I always were my guy. We always had a great relationship. Anytime you call, I'm in.
Well, I'll do that. I won't call you every week, but I won't wear you out. We don't want to wear out all the stories. But
not a problem.
But I appreciate you joining us. Great info, and I assume you'll be. If you're not on the sideline, I'm assuming you're going to be somewhere in the stadium come Saturday, I would think. Huh?
Yeah, I plan on being on the sideline at the TU game. Down there rooting on my Pokes, man.
Good deal. Well, we'll look for you then. I appreciate your time, bud.
All right, Tom. Thanks a lot. Hey, man, go Pokes.
Okay.